Hey amigos, you better buckle your two female-ended seatbelts and hold on to your butts, because today on The Escapist, we're watching Jurassic Park. And we spared no expense. Okay, pretty good intro, huh? Welcome to The Escapist. I am your host, Cairo Phillips. This is a movie podcast where we're going to be reviewing classic movies. Some of the episodes on this podcast, it's going to be me plus a guest. Some it's just going to be me on my own. For this first episode, our very first episode, it's just going to be me flying solo, but I'm very excited to have you joining me. I'm going to be reviewing all sorts of different movies. The goal is going to be to release one episode a week. Hopefully I'll be able to stay on schedule. If you have any requests for movies you'd like us to review, please email me. It's escapistpod@gmail.com. That's escapistpod@gmail.com. Looking forward to hearing from you. Okay, with that, let's dive into the first episode. For our very first episode, I'm going to be reviewing Jurassic Park. I should say up front that this is going to be kind of a deep dive into this movie. So if you haven't watched Jurassic Park in a while, I might recommend a repeat viewing before you listen to the podcast. Okay, with that, let's get to it.
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
So Jurassic Park came out in 1993, June 1993. It was based on the best-selling novel by Michael Crichton, which was released in 1990. Crichton also co-wrote the screenplay for the movie. The movie was directed by Steven Spielberg, who in 1993, I would say that's sort of right around the peak of his powers. I would say that it was sort of that transitional period between Spielberg, the kind of adolescent escapist filmmaker, and Spielberg, the more mature, more adult filmmaker. He had already done some kind of mature stuff in the 80s. He did Color Purple, and he did Empire of the Sun. And then in 1993, well, he did Jurassic Park, which was just sort of a summer blockbuster. But then later that year, he also did Schindler's List, came out the same year. Pretty amazing. He did both those movies the same year. And he won the Best Director Oscar for Schindler's List, won Best Picture as well. And then Jurassic Park was a huge box office smash. It grossed, $915 million worldwide. It broke the all-time record at the time, set by Spielberg himself with E.T., which made $700 million. So yeah, 1993, pretty good year for Spielberg. Let's see, rounding out the top 10 at the box office in 1993, you've got Mrs. Doubtfire, The Fugitive, Schindler's List, The Firm, Indecent Proposal, Cliffhanger, Sleepless in Seattle, Philadelphia, The Pelican Brief. Those are the top 10. Other notable movies that year, it's a good year for movies, 1993. In the Line of Fire, Perfect World, Tombstone, Falling Down, True Romance, Dazed and Confused, Searching for Bobby Fischer, Shortcuts, and Groundhog Day. Solid year. 1993, really solid year for movies. Let's see, how influential was Jurassic Park? Obviously, the visual effects were groundbreaking. CGI really was kind of a novelty at the time, and this kind of set the stage for a lot of effects-heavy franchises to come. The computer effects were done by Industrial Light and Magic, which was owned by George Lucas, and he saw what they did with Jurassic Park, and he realized that he could go ahead with his Star Wars prequels. Peter Jackson, he said that Jurassic Park was sort of motivation for him, that he realized he could go ahead with his Lord of the Rings project. And then Stanley Kubrick, when he saw Jurassic Park, he realized that the technology was available so he could do his AI movie, Artificial Intelligence, which was really effects heavy. And he brought in Spielberg to direct that one. And then even outside of the movies, the movie was influential. After this movie came out, a lot of people wanted to study paleontology. They got a big surge in applications to like paleontology programs. And then also in 1995, the NBA created an expansion team in Toronto. And, you know, they named the team the Raptors, basically because of this movie.
The Raptors, the 2019 NBA champs.
Okay, how did the critics like Jurassic Park? Has a 91% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, both critics and audience, 91%. Roger Ebert, he gave it 3 stars. He liked it. He didn't love it. Basically, he complained that they showed the dinosaurs too early in the movie. He said, quote, "When young Steven Spielberg was first offered the screenplay for Jaws, he said he would direct the movie on one condition, that he didn't have to show the shark for the first hour. By slowly building the audience's apprehension, he felt the shark would be much more impressive when it finally arrived. He was right. I wish he had remembered that lesson when he was preparing Jurassic Park." See, I got to disagree with Roger here. I think he's wrong. I'm pretty sure Spielberg didn't show the shark early on in Jaws, not because he wanted to build tension, but because they just couldn't get the shark to work, right? It was really, really tough to make it work in water. I mean, at least that's the story I've always heard. And I also think he's wrong on Jurassic Park. We don't see the T-Rex for an hour into the movie. I don't know what he means. We see the dinosaurs early and often. I don't know what he's talking about. Spielberg said, I was really just trying to make a good sequel to Jaws on land. He cited Godzilla movies as an inspiration. I think the movie definitely has a lot of similarities to Jaws. We'll talk about that more later. Let's see. Oscars in 1993, the Academy Awards, Jurassic Park won for sound effects editing, and visual effects. That's all it was nominated for. I'm not sure I know what the difference is between sound and sound effects editing. All right. Anything else I want to talk about in the intro? I don't think so. Let's move on now, and we'll get into the categories. My first category is things I like. Things I like about Jurassic Park. So what do I like about this movie? Just the general idea of cloning dinosaurs. It's such a cool premise. The idea that you can find dinosaur DNA preserved inside a mosquito, which is inside a piece of amber. I love that. You can actually picture that working in real life. It doesn't seem like fantasy. Other things I like. Using the Velociraptor as the bad guy, it's great. Raptor's a really great villain. And if you think about it, this is kind of a big risk that they took. I mean, Velociraptor, this is a dinosaur that nobody ever heard of before this movie, and they made it the main villain. You would think that for this big budget dinosaur movie, they would make the T-Rex the bad guy. But in this movie, the T-Rex is kind of the hero in a weird way. And having the raptors there works really, really well. Raptors are still really scary. They're still using raptors in the sequels. The visual effects in this movie, they really hold up well. It's aged really, really well. This movie is, let's see, it's 2020 now. So the movie's almost 30 years old. Still looks great. People say the reason why the visual effects in Jurassic Park still look good is because that when they did it, it wasn't pure CGI. It was a mix of CGI and practical effects. Basically, in this movie, whenever you see the dinosaur entirely within the frame, like the entire dinosaur is on screen, that's CGI. But when you only see part of the dinosaur, like its hand or its foot or its head, that's like a puppet. And the reason they do that is because they can make that more realistic. So when the camera's closer to it, you see more detail. And so that's what makes it feel more real. Industrial Light and Magic did the visual effects, like I said. And then Stan Winston did the animatronics. He's this famous puppet guy. They did a great job. I think part of the credit has to go to Spielberg, who, you know, when you watch this movie, you see what he does is he mainly puts the dinosaurs and humans together in close quarters. It gives it sort of this claustrophobic horror type movie vibe. Like when the T-Rex sticks its snout through the roof of the car, or at the end of the movie when the kids are in the kitchen with the raptors. It's that proximity of the dinosaurs I think makes them feel more real. Let's see. Other things I like about this movie, the dialogue. There's a lot of great lines in this movie. It's a really good screenplay, a lot of great quotes. We'll get to this later in the I have a Best Lines award. On that same note, I love the comedy in this movie. This is a really funny movie. I'd kind of forgotten how funny this movie is. I really think Spielberg is actually really good at handling comedy. You don't really think of him as a comedic director. And I mean, he doesn't do outright comedies, but I think all of his great movies, even his dramas, they have a lot of these little comedic moments. They're often kind of dry, kind of understated, maybe a little bit dark. One of the best examples is that moment in Raiders of the Lost Ark when Indy shoots the guy with the sword, right? And the story I always heard about that is that they had this big elaborate fight scene between those guys planned, but for some reason they couldn't shoot that shot. So Spielberg just came up with it on the spot. He just improvised that moment. He said, "Well, just shoot him with your gun." Or that moment in Jaws when Quint crushes the empty beer can, and then Hooper crushes the styrofoam cup, just staring back at him. It's that kind of dry, kind of Jewish humor, I guess, for lack of a better word, that Spielberg has. Anyway, Jurassic Park is full of these little funny moments. I'll try to point them out. Other things I like about this movie, the costumes, the wardrobe. Jeff Goldblum, he's in all black. He's murdered out. He looks ridiculous, but somehow he pulls it off. He's got the black leather jacket, the black pants, he's got the black tinted glasses. They're not really sunglasses. They're like eyeglasses, but just with a slight tint to the lenses. I'm not even sure what the hell those are supposed to be. He's like trying to look like Bono or something. He's got the black shirt and he's got the top 4 or 5 buttons undone, and it keeps getting lower throughout the movie until his shirt finally comes off. So he's got this deep plunging V neckline. He looks like Axl Rose. And then, so Goldblum's all black, and then opposite him, you got John Hammond in all white. He's got the white shirt, the white linen pants, the Panama hat. He's got that cane, that bamboo cane. And he looks kind of godlike, which he's got the white beard. I guess that's kind of what he is. He's creating life. Anyway, the two of them, white and black, it's almost like a cartoon, but somehow it works. There's some more detail in the costumes in this movie I want to get into later, but I love that. Speaking of Goldblum, just his performance in general, this is an all-time iconic role. It still holds up to this day. He's great. This is a Hall of Fame performance for him. Some of the best scenes in this movie are just Goldblum being Goldblum. Other great performances, Wayne Knight, who plays Dennis Nedry. Most people know him as Newman from Seinfeld, right?
Hello, Newman.
He's great in this movie. He also has some of the best scenes. Another great performance that I really like, I didn't realize it was good until I rewatched it recently, is the kid, Tim. It's John Hammond's grandson. He's really, really good. He's played by, this actor is called Joseph Mazzello. He hadn't done too much after Jurassic Park. He's done a few things, but he's really good in this movie. He really runs that whole range of emotions for a little kid. He's excited, he's scared, he's electrified, right? He's really believable. He's super into dinosaurs. He's excited to meet Grant. Grant's kind of his hero. And little things he does, like the way he laughs when he says the Gallimimus.
They're flocking this way.
Or whatever, are flocking this way. Apparently he auditioned to be Robin Williams' son in Hook. And Spielberg really liked him, but he thought he was too young for the role, so he put him in Jurassic Park. Other things I like, the idea that T-Rex vision is based on movement. I have no idea if this is true or not, but it's a cool little gimmick they use, for the action scenes where they have to hold still so the T-Rex doesn't see them. It's fun. Creates some tension. It almost gives the T-Rex a little bit of character. I love the Mr. DNA cartoon where they explain how they clone the dinosaurs. It's still really fun to watch that, and it's kind of a really genius way to do a lot of exposition. Apparently that cartoon was Spielberg's idea. I love the Jeep Wrangler and the Ford Explorer. The cars in this movie are all pimped out, Jurassic Park style. I love those cars. I love the helicopter that they take to the island. It doesn't have any landing gear. It's just got these retractable wheels. And I remember when I first saw the movie, I always thought that was so cool. And even now, rewatching it, I still think it's a cool looking helicopter. Let's see. What else do I like? Oh, the spitting dinosaur that kills Nedry, the Dilophosaurus. This thing still scares the shit out of me. Honestly, I think the Dilophosaurus is more scary than the raptors. Because when you first see it, it doesn't look very scary. It's small. It makes this like little clucking noise like a chicken. It looks harmless. But then in that scene where it kills Nedry inside the Jeep and it flares its little wings out or whatever, I can't look. I still can't watch that scene. I have to look away. What else do I like about this movie? John Williams, the theme song. Da-na-na-na-na. It's great. He's one of the best. He's a pro. It's one of his best themes. Other things I like. Oh, how about this? Samuel Jackson.
Hold on to your butts.
Samuel Jackson. Just the fact that he's in this movie, and I always forget that he's in this movie every time. Every time I watch Jurassic Park, I see him, and I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot. Sam Jackson's in this movie. He just kind of hides out. It's funny. He's arguably the biggest star of the film, right? I mean, not even arguably. He's by far and away had the biggest career out of any of the other actors in this movie, but you kind of forget about him here. Does anybody remember his character's name? It's Ray Arnold. Nobody knows that, right? Here's a fun fact. Samuel Jackson is the highest grossing actor of all time. That is, the movies that he's been in have made more money at the box office than any other actor. And the reason why is because, well, he's been in a lot of big movies, obviously. He's in this. He's in Jurassic Park. He was in the Star Wars prequels, Mace Windu, right? And then he's in the, Marvel movies, the Eye Patch guy, Nick Fury, right? So, highest grossing actor. I also love Sam Jackson's, I also love the cigarette he smokes in this movie. This is back in the early 90s when you could still have people smoking cigarettes in movies kind of designed for kids. And the way he smokes it, it's just, he keeps it right on the tip of his lip, right on the edge of his lip. and he talks with it, and it looks like it's about to fall off as he's talking. I love that.
Access main program. Access main security. Access main program grid.
Let's see. Other things I love. Okay, last thing. This is... I love Hammond eating the ice cream in this movie when the power goes out. And so the ice cream's going to melt, so he's just eating it all. I love that. That's something I would do. All right, moving on. This is our next category. This is our next award. We're doing awards for Best Scene. This is the Best Scene category. So the first nominee for Best Scene it's the opening scene. This is the opening scene with the raptor, where they're delivering the raptor to the raptor cage. The movie starts out, it's just the universal credits on the screen, and there's no music. We just hear these jungle sounds, and then there's this like big, dark, ominous thrum. And it really sets the stage. And we see this motion of the trees. The trees are shaking. There's this big light, backlight coming through the trees. This big, irrational light. Like, where's that light coming from that Spielberg loves? Coming through the trees, that's that Spielberg backlight. And you're thinking, ooh, this is a dinosaur movie, so this must be a T-Rex that's coming through the trees. And it's, this is right off the bat, Spielberg's kind of trolling us, pretending like he's going to show us a T-Rex. It's actually just a cage. It's a forklift with a cage on it. And so all these guys are standing around in gray work suits and red hard hats, and they're holding these tasers. They're like rifles with tasers on the end of them, and they have a little flashlight on the end of them. It's kind of cheesy. It looks like a weapon out of a Star Trek Next Generation episode. And then we see our close-up of Robert Muldoon, who's the park warden, who's one of my favorite characters. And he's glorious here. He's just covered head to toe in khaki. He's got these very, very short khaki shorts, cargo shorts. I don't know how he fit into those. They're super short. He's got everything khaki shirt, khaki vest, khaki socks. He's got the khaki safari hat, and the hat, he's got the one brim on one side rolled up, right? So you know that he's like Australian. He's got the pump shotgun. He's got a watch, a wristwatch. He's got two faces on it, which I don't even know what that's for. He looks like Steve Irwin's crazy militant older brother. I don't know which came first, Jurassic Park or Steve Irwin. I think whichever one came first influenced the other. I love Muldoon. Just his name alone, Muldoon. He sounds like a safari type dude. And he's just a boss in this scene. He's commanding the dudes. He's telling the pushing team to move in.
Pushing team, move in there.
He wants the tasers on full charge.
I want tasers on full charge.
He tells the gatekeeper to lift the gate.
Joffrey, raise the gate.
Everyone's running around. There's so many flashlights and other sources of light in this scene. Spielberg loves his lights. If you look inside the cage in this scene, when the gatekeeper is climbing on top of the cage, you can see there's a flashlight inside the cage. Like they gave the raptor a flashlight to hold. And there's just like quiet tension building up throughout this scene. Like we know some shit's about to go down. Spielberg is he's the best at building that suspense. Kind of reminding me of the opening scene of Jaws with the kids on the beach, right? And the girl goes in the water. Anyway, the gatekeeper gets up on the gate, and then all hell breaks loose. Raptor rams the cage loose. Gatekeeper falls to the ground. The raptor gets a hold of him. Muldoon goes into action. He grabs hold of the worker. He's yelling at his boys to taser her, to work her back.
Work her back!
The red hard hats are tasering the raptor, but it's not doing any good. And then Muldoon realizes he's going to lose his grip on the gatekeeper, and he finally yells out the first great line in the movie.
Shoot her! Shoot her!
And, when he says shoot her, whenever I watched this movie when I was younger, I was always confused when he says shoot her because, well, those guys are holding tasers. What are they going to shoot her with? And I didn't realize until I just rewatched it to prepare for this podcast. If you look at that scene, only the guys up front by the cage are holding tasers. The guys in the back, they're holding rifles, like M16 rifles. Anyway, this is a classic opening scene. It's only about 2 minutes long, but I'm on the edge of my seat, start to finish, watching this. I love it. Okay, next great scene is Nedry meets Dodgson. I love this scene. So this is our introduction to Dennis Nedry, played by Wayne Knight. This is where they meet at this hole-in-the-wall outdoor cafe in Costa Rica, right? Where Dodgson's bringing him the money. So Wayne Knight, he's just pigging out at the table. He's having lunch. He's wearing this big floral print Hawaiian shirt. And he's got one of those old 1980s calculator wristwatches. I love that. There's a really underrated wristwatch game in this movie. Dodson shows up. He's got the Panama hat. He's wearing the Wayfarer sunglasses. He's trying to look incognito, and so Nedry makes fun of him.
Dodson! Dodson! We've got Dodson here!
And Dodgson's got the leather bag with he's got the shaving cream can, right? And the $750,000 cash he's going to give to Nedry. When Nedry sees the bag of money, he's so excited. I love that. And then when he actually sees Dodgson shows him the shaving cream canister. He shows how it works. And it opens up, has these little slots for embryos. And when Nedry sees that, he does this amazing pig squeal.
Oh, you God.
It's cool to compartmentalize inside.
You got so that's great.
Customs can even check it if they
And then Nedry tries out the shaving cream. He sprays it onto his hand. He has this amazing fat man laugh that he does.
There's enough coolant inside for 36 hours.
And then I love this part. He transfers the shaving cream from his hand onto the piece of pie like it's whipped cream. And then right when the scene's about to end, they throw in that little moment at the end where the waiter brings the check, and there's this little pause where Nedry and Dodgson both look at the check and then look at each other, and then Nedry says,
Don't get cheap on me, Dodson.
"Don't get cheap on me, Dodgson." I can't tell you how many times I've said this line to friends at bars and restaurants when it comes time to pay the bill. It's still one of my go-to catchphrases. Any other standard action movie, if you think about it, would have ended before the waiter brings the check, but it's these little moments in Jurassic Park that really make it special. It's more of that Spielberg humor. Okay, the next great scene is the helicopter ride. So this is when they're all riding into the island on the helicopter. It's when we first meet Goldblum, and this scene is all Goldblum, and it's one of the best character intro scenes of all time. I love this scene. Goldblum in this movie, he is just iconic. You know, despite being a supporting character, he doesn't have much screen time. He probably only has 10 or 12 minutes on screen. He's not really in the second half of the movie at all. And so despite this, if you think about it, Goldblum's really the face of this franchise. There's what, five movies now? You know, and I know in the newer movies they have what's his name, the Guardians of the Galaxy guy. I know he's the lead of the newer sequels, but I think Goldblum still owns this franchise. They gave him the lead in the second movie, Lost World, basically just because everyone loved him in the first one as Malcolm. He's so perfect for this role, Goldblum. The way he plays Malcolm, he is all at the same time both charming and eccentric and kind of an asshole, right? His little ums and ahs and smirks and his weird laugh and all the Goldblumicity that only he can bring, he cranks it up to 11 in this movie, and his performance has only gotten better with age. And in this first scene in the helicopter, it's just a clinic he puts on. It's the Goldblum show. So he starts out with... So it's him and Dr. Grant, Dr. Sattler in the helicopter with Gennaro the lawyer and John Hammond. And so Dr. Grant, Dr. Sattler, right, they're the dinosaur experts and they dig up dinosaurs. And so Goldblum opens them with this great line. He goes, "So you two dig up dinosaurs."
So you two dig up dinosaurs?
I love that line. It's almost like, you know, what these pickup guys do. Like a neg where they kind of insult a girl and compliment her at the same time, right? Malcolm seems like he'd be into that pickup crowd, like, "Oh, you dig up dinosaurs, isn't that cute?" And, you know, you can tell Dr. Alan Grant, he's not feeling it at all. He just gives Goldblum this kind of like fuck off response. He says, "Yeah, we try to dig up dinosaurs."
Try to.
And then Goldblum, he does this little laugh where he just purrs like a kitten.
You'll have to get used.
I love it. And you can see in this scene, watch the scene, see Laura Dern's reaction to Goldblum. She looks positively smitten. And you can tell it's genuine. She's really digging Goldblum. Apparently, they dated, the two actors, after meeting on this movie, and I'm not surprised at all. Laura Dern does a really great job in this movie portraying Sattler, Dr. Sattler, sort of, you know, nerdy, yet still feminine and attractive. She plays that role well. She's kind of shy and awkward when Goldblum's flirting with her. Right? You can tell she's not used to spinning around dudes like him. She's good for the role, though. She's believable as a scientist. And then Malcolm has another great line. He's talking about chaos theory and all this stuff, strange attractors. So he gives Dern another great line.
Dr. Sattler, I refuse to believe that you aren't familiar with the concept of attraction.
And he's doing it all in front of Grant. Grant looks like he wants to murder him. It's great. I love this scene. Goldblum's got a very unique physical presence. He's got this very eccentric kind of skinny kid, nerdy vibe, but he's also got a very undeniable masculinity, you know? Like you can see definitely in his earlier work, especially when he's got a little bit more muscle on his frame, like in The Fly, and his height really helped. He's got like 6'4", he's a really tall dude, and he's got that sort of like that voice, that theatrical voice, very boomy.
Look above you.
There should be a large bundle of cable and pipes all heading in the same
Direction, follow that.
So all of that kind of gives him some gravitas. He's a very unique actor. Anyway, Goldblum is just, he's lights out in this scene, just lights out. You cannot not watch the helicopter scene if it's on TV. Every time I see it, it makes me want to be in the helicopter with that group. And then there's another great moment later on in that scene where they're descending in the helicopter, where they hit that little patch of turbulence. And John Hammond, he goes, Yahoo!
Yahoo!
I love that little moment. Okay, the next great scene is the Brachiosaurus scene. I mean, this is probably the most famous scene in this movie. It's an iconic scene. This is where we first see one of the CGI dinosaurs. It's that Brachiosaurus. I think everybody probably remembers first seeing this scene in the movie theaters when you finally get to see a real dinosaur and it looks real and it feels real. And it was like nothing else we'd ever seen in movies before in 1993. And it still holds up to this day. I think what makes it work, it's not just the visual effects. I mean, those are great. And John Williams' music is really great in this scene. But I think what makes this scene work is Spielberg. What he does, the way he directs it, he doesn't just show you the dinosaur right away. He really builds up to that moment where he reveals the dinosaur. And the way he does that is that he doesn't show you the Brachiosaurus. He shows you the reaction shots of Grant and Sattler and Malcolm looking at the dinosaur. So we see their faces. So you remember they're in these Jeeps, and Hammond has them stop on this grassy hill, and they don't see the dinosaur yet. And then Grant, he just kind of like looks outside the Jeep window, and he almost does like a little double take. He leans his head out. He almost sort of mutters something to himself, like he can't believe what he's seeing, right? Takes his hat off, stands up in the back of the Jeep. His aviator sunglasses, they're like a little bit uneven on his face. I always notice that. He takes those off. We finally see his eyes, and his eyes are going wild, like an animal. His brain can't compute what he's looking at. Meanwhile, Laura Dern, she's up in the front seat. She's busy examining this plant, saying that it should be extinct. She hasn't even noticed the dinosaur. Grant just grabs her head, turns it to the side, forces her to look out the Jeep. And, you know, she's dumbstruck as well. She stands up. She takes her glasses off. Her jaw drops. Finally, we get both of them standing up in the Jeep, both their faces on screen, staring wide-eyed. And then finally, Spielberg cuts to... Anyway, they get out of the Jeep, they walk up to it, and then this is one of my favorite lines in the movie. Grant, he points up at the Brachiosaurus, and then he looks back at Sattler, and he says...
It's a dinosaur.
I love that line from Grant. I love that because, I mean, think about it. Here's a guy, he's a full professor of paleontology. He studies dinosaurs for a living. He knows all about dinosaurs. Of everybody, you would think he'd be the guy who's the most like academic and somber about the whole thing. But when he finally sees a real life dinosaur, he reacts like any of us would. He reacts like a little kid, like, holy shit, it's a dinosaur. He can't believe it. He can't even remember the name of the species. I love it. I love Goldblum's reaction. The crazy son of a bitch did it, right? I love the lawyer, Gennaro, what he says. We're going to make a fortune with this place. That's funny. I love the Jeep driver. He couldn't look more bored, right? It's a really nice touch. Because, you know, he's seen this thing 100 times already. It's just another day at work for him. Anyway, this is a great scene. 1993, I was 10, 11 years old when this movie came out, when I saw it in the theater. And, you know, whenever I watch this scene, I still feel like I'm 11 years old again, watching it in the theater for the first time. And any scene that can do that, can take you back to your childhood like that, it's pretty magical. Okay, the next best scene This is Malcolm Explains Chaos Theory. So this is when they're in the car out on the tour, and they're out seeing the dinosaurs. Well, they haven't seen any dinosaurs yet. They're at the T-Rex pen. The T-Rex doesn't show up. This is while they're in the car before they reach the Triceratops. And this is just... this is another tour de force from Goldblum. Basically, Goldblum spends most of his time in this movie just hitting on Laura Dern, and I just can't get enough of it. He's just, he's in the zone in this scene. He goes into the red zone. He's just as good, if not better, than his performance in the helicopter ride. He starts out saying that, you know, the T-Rex didn't show up at the last exhibit because it doesn't obey any set schedule, and that's why the T-Rex didn't show up, and that's like the essence of chaos. Malcolm's whole thing, his whole philosophy is this chaos theory, which says that like complex systems are unpredictable. And anyway, that's his whole shtick. The book goes into it way more than the movie does. But when he's saying that, he does this little moment where he does this little like drum beat on his knees with his hands. I don't know why that little moment always makes me laugh.
The essence of chaos.
I'm still not clear on chaos.
And so Sadler asks Goldblum about chaos theory, and then Goldblum just goes into overdrive. He is full-on predator mode with Dr. Ellie Sattler. So he starts explaining chaos theory to her, while at the same time doing this completely unabashed pickup routine on her. He's touching her shoulder, he's touching her hair, he does this little parlor trick with the glass of water, dropping water down her hand so he gets to hold her hand the whole time, right? He even does a neg, I noticed. That he does another neg in this scene where the water drop goes a different direction the second time he drops it because he says of imperfections in the skin.
Assholes, imperfections in the skin.
Imperfections in the skin?
And he's doing this all the while, right? Next to them is Grant sitting them, and Grant couldn't care less, right? He jumps out of the car to go check out the Triceratops. It's too funny. And then Dern follows Grant, and then that leaves Goldblum there alone in the car. And this is one of my favorite moments in the movie. He goes, and here I am talking to myself.
See, here I'm now by myself talking to myself. That's chaos theory.
This is Goldblum at his all-time best. 1993, the Best Supporting Actor Oscar. They gave it to Tommy Lee Jones for The Fugitive. I'm not saying he didn't deserve it. He's great in that movie. But I feel like Goldblum should have been nominated just for this scene alone. Just for this scene alone. Okay, the next great scene, this is the Triceratops scene. This is, I love this scene. This is a really, really nice scene. Sam Neill actually does a really good bit of acting here. I don't love Sam Neill in general in this movie. I'll get into him later, but I think he's really good in this scene, actually. You can tell how emotional he is to see the Triceratops up close. He says the Triceratops was his favorite dinosaur when he was a kid. The Triceratops is lying down on the ground. Grant just like kind of rests on top of it, and he's listening to it breathe as its rib cage goes up and down. He's smiling. The kids, the grandkids are there. They're excited. Even the lawyer Gennaro is kind of excited. Laura Dern, she's great in this scene. She's in tears when she sees this thing, and she's really concerned that it's sick. You know, the Triceratops is sick, and they can't figure out why, and so she's really concerned. And so she wants to investigate its poop, right? She wants to go through its poop. She wants to go through its droppings to see what it's been eating. And then Goldblum, he's got a great line. He goes,
Dino. Droppings?
Droppings. I love how he says it twice. And then when they finally show the droppings, right? It's this incredibly large pile of Triceratops droppings. Goldblum, he walks up to it and he says, well, you know what he says. You know what he says.
That is one big pile of shit.
It's one of the best lines in the movie. What's great about this moment, it's not just the line, and it's not just the comedic gag of the incredibly large pile of dinosaur shit, but it's the way that Goldblum walks up to the pile of shit. Go back and watch this for yourself. He doesn't just walk. He doesn't just walk up to the pile of shit. The way he walks, he like swaggers. He swaggers right up to that pile of shit. He's like a catwalk model. He looks like Eastwood walking into a saloon. It's almost overdone. It's almost overacted. It's like somebody trying to parody Goldblum. I love this scene. It's a great scene. And then I like at the end when Laura Dern decides to stay with the Triceratops because it's sick, despite the storm coming in. I like that. I like her character. She's a good person. All right, the next nominee for Best Scene. This is the last nominee for Best Scene. This is, I think everybody knows which scene is coming last, right? This is the T-Rex scene. It's the T-Rex scene. This is the heart of the movie. So the T-Rex scene. So getting back to what Roger Ebert was saying about how they showed the dinosaurs too early in this movie, I'll just tell you, Jurassic Park, this movie is exactly 2 hours long. Like to the minute. This is exactly 2 hours long. This scene, the T-Rex scene, it occurs exactly 1 hour into the movie. So halfway into the movie before we see the T-Rex. So this criticism from Roger Ebert that they showed the dinosaurs too soon, I don't get it. And you know, he's comparing it to Jaws. If I'm not mistaken, I think we see the shark in Jaws before the halfway point, don't we? I don't know. I could be wrong. I haven't seen Jaws in a while. We'll review Jaws on this podcast for sure. We'll see. Anyway, kind of like the Brachiosaurus scene, what I love about the T-Rex scene is that it's mostly build up, right? He doesn't show the T-Rex too early. He kind of just builds up to that moment. It's kind of a slow burn. It's a 10-minute scene actually from start to finish. And most of that is just building up to the T-Rex. So just to set the scene for you. The cars are parked out in the rain. It's nighttime. The electricity's off because Dennis Nedry has turned off the park. He's doing his shenanigans. He's stealing the embryos. So the cars are just stuck there. It's humid. Malcolm has to wipe the condensation off the inside of the windshield so he can see. The kids are in the other car. They're bored. Lex is fanning herself with her hat. Gennaro, the lawyer, is up front sleeping. Tim is playing around in the back of the car with the night vision goggles, right? There's no music. It's just rainfall. And it's this eerie quiet that's just too quiet, you know? Like you know something's going to happen. Tim is messing around in the back of the car, and then he just stops moving all of a sudden. He turns around, he comes up to the front of the car, and he's got this very puzzled look on his face. He goes up to the front of the car, and then the moment of the movie, the most memorable moment of the movie, he stares at that plastic cup of water that's on the dashboard. And the water vibrates. And Jesus Christ, to this day, a chill still goes down my spine, right? And then, so Tim puts on the night vision goggles. He looks out the window and he sees that the goat is gone. Remember that they had put up the goat before when they were at the T-Rex pen to lure it to come out, but it didn't come out. So the goat's just been standing there, but now the goat is gone, right? We don't see it anymore. We just see the chain that it was attached to kind of swaying.
Where's the goat?
Another chill goes down my spine. Kind of reminds me of that scene in Jaws. I keep going back to Jaws when on the beach when the dog goes missing, right? And the dude's calling out his name, but he can't find the dog. It's like, we don't have to see the dog. We know what happened to the dog, and we know what happened to the goat. So, Spielberg, he's done all this before. He's a pro. And then the T-Rex shows up, and the way that he shows the T-Rex, it's just almost kind of casual, right? At first, we don't really see much of it. We just see a claw that's resting on top of the electric fence. The electric fence is out, of course. There's still no music. It's just rain. And then we see the head come into frame, and we don't really see it that well because it's through the glass and there's all this rain, so it's kind of obscured. And then very casually, the entire T-Rex just breaks through all the wires of the fence, and it walks out, stands next to the cars, and we finally see all of it in frame for the first time. And when I was a kid watching this in the theater, I think I cursed out loud, like little 10-year-old me. I think I said, "Holy shit." And to this day, watching it, you're still like, oh my God, it's a Tyrannosaurus. It still looks amazing. It feels so real. And the roar that it lets out, that roar is so primal. I feel like my bone marrow melts when it roars. And, the rest of the scene, it's all action. T-Rex starts attacking the car. Grant and Malcolm trying to lure it away with flares. Lex gets out the flashlight, right, for some goddamn reason that doesn't make any sense, so it starts attacking the car even more. I love that shot where she shines the light, the flashlight, in the T-Rex eyes. It lowers its head to the window. The pupil constricts. I love that shot so much. That's so genius. I love it when the T-Rex knocks down the bathroom hut and sees Gennaro hiding in there, right? He's sitting on the toilet, scared for his life. And for a second, the T-Rex is kind of confused. It turns its head like a puppy right before it eats him. Anyway, the scene is, of course, a classic. You really feel like you're there with them in that car with the kids and the T-Rex and the mud and the rain. and the T-Rex punches its snout through the glass roof, and you can feel like the hot breath all over you. There's no music. It's just rain and screams and roars from the T-Rex. It's everything you want from a T-Rex scene. It's everything you want. I think most importantly, it's not too long. Most of the scene, again, it's just building up to the T-Rex. We only get a little bit of T-Rex. I would compare this scene to the scene in the sequel, the T-Rex scene in Lost World. You watch that, it goes on way, way, way too long. It's like boring by the end. I think Spielberg, I don't know. I think he just mailed that one in. All right, those are your nominees for Best Scene. They're all great. The winner is... It's the T-Rex scene. It's got to be, right? That's the winner.
Welcome to Jurassic Park.
Okay, moving on. Let's see. Next category, we've got Critics Corner. This is Critics Corner. So this is some things I wrote down that I kind of don't like about this movie. Here's a question. Why couldn't they just tranquilize the raptor during transport at the beginning of the movie? Why wasn't that an option? Why do we need 100 guys with guns? Seems like it'd be easy to tranquilize it. Other items in the Critics Corner. What the hell's going on with Sam Neill's accent in this movie?
Direction changes, just like a flock of birds evading a predator.
It's all over the place. He sounds like Kevin Costner in Prince of Thieves, except the other way around. So I had to look this up. Sam Neill, he was born in Ireland, Northern Ireland, and then he lived there when he was a kid, and then he grew up the rest of his life in New Zealand. So I assume he's got one of those sort of British colony accents. But what I realized watching this movie recently is that I actually have no idea what his normal voice sounds like, because the only two movies I know him from are Jurassic Park, where he's trying to do an American accent, and then Hunt for Red October, where he's trying to do a Russian accent.
And I will have a pickup truck.
And I can't tell what he sounds like, if he's trying to do a British guy, trying to do an American accent, or vice versa. His New Zealand accent comes out a lot, I feel like, in this movie. He's all over the place.
I guess it means the power's off.
Rewatching this movie, I had an idea about who would have been perfect for this role, and it's really obvious who it should have been, and that's Harrison Ford, right? I'll get to this later a little bit when we talk about alternate castings, but Harrison Ford would have been so perfect for this role. I'm not sure why that didn't happen. No offense to Sam Neill. He's not a bad actor. I just don't think he's right for this role. And it's not just his accent. I think I don't think he's suited playing a good guy. He's got kind of this evilness about him. I can't really put my finger on it. I just think he'd be better off playing a bad guy than a good guy. Other things I don't like about this movie. Lex, the sister, she's kind of useless in this movie. You really don't need her. I think the movie would be way better with just her brother Tim. She really doesn't do anything. She has that one scene at the end of the movie where she hacks. I put that in quotation marks. She hacks the computer system to lock the door to the control room so the raptor can't get in.
It's a Unix system. I know this.
If you look at this scene, her hacking in this scene, it consists merely of her like pointing and clicking some desktop icons. It's ridiculous. I don't think she uses the keyboard once. So she has all the hacking skills of my mother. Other things I don't like. Grant and Sattler as a couple doesn't really work. They don't really have any chemistry. At the Montana dig scene early on when we first see them, they're kind of like playing grab ass with each other. And it's really, really awkward. I think Spielberg wanted us to know they were a couple because you wouldn't know otherwise. And it doesn't really work. You can tell that it was weird for the actors. You can tell it's weird for the other people at the dig site. Speaking of that dig site, the kid at that dig site who talks shit to Grant.
That doesn't look very scary. More like a 6-foot turkey.
That kid sucks. Like, why is he even there? Who is that kid? Is he somebody's son? I don't even understand who he's supposed to be. He's pudgy. He's wearing this really stupid hat. It's black. He's got this black hat that has nothing on it. There's no logo. It's got an adjustable back. What kind of hat is that for a kid to wear? What kind of kid wears a hat like that? He looks like a middle-aged lesbian. He's a really, really terrible actor. I'll get into this later about when we do our bad acting category. When Grant shows him the raptor claw, his eyes go so super wide. It's like the worst take in movie history. I've been watching this movie since I was a kid, and I hate this kid. Even when I was a kid, I hated this kid. Okay, other items in the critics' corner. So I said the dinosaurs look great. and they do look great, but there's a couple exceptions. One is there's a few shots where Spielberg puts the camera down close to the ground, and he has the dinosaurs' legs kind of moving alongside, so you can see them walking. All you see in frame is the legs, though. Like he does this with the raptors a few times. And it's really obvious in these scenes that those legs are just props. They don't really look that good. And the way that they move, you can just tell it's some dude holding up the prop leg, moving it up and down. It just looks cheesy. It really hasn't aged well at all. And then the other visual effect that hasn't aged well is the Gallimimus scene. That's like that big group of animals that's outside that's flocking during the daytime. The CGI really doesn't look good, and the T-Rex attacks one of them, and it doesn't look as good as the rest of the CGI in the movie. I don't know why. I think maybe because it's daytime, and the rest of the CGI is at night. I'm not sure. Another thing that really bothers me about this movie, this is actually probably number one on my Jurassic Park shit list. This is when they're flying in on the helicopter to the island, and so they're on the helicopter, and they reach the island, and John Hammond looks outside the window, and he like sees the island and he gets all excited. He's like, oh, there it is.
There it is.
But here's the problem. If you look at this scene, look at where John Hammond is sitting in the helicopter. He's not facing forwards in a position that would allow him to see the island. He's facing backwards in the helicopter. So when he looks out the window, the only thing that he would see is ocean. So how can he possibly see the island and say, oh, there it is? He's facing the wrong way. Really, really bothers me. By far and away the worst scene in the movie is the lunch that they have before they go out into the park, where they're eating the Chilean sea bass, where they're surrounded all by the slide projectors in that weird room. I don't like this scene. I really hate this scene, actually. First of all, how annoying would it be to have a meal in that room with the slide projectors going on, blinding you while you're trying to eat? And then, second of all, Goldblum in this scene, he is just the worst. He is the worst in this scene. He gets all pompous and preachy.
Gee, the lack of humility before nature that's being displayed here staggers me.
He's talking gloom and doom about the park.
Genetic power is the most awesome force the planet's ever seen, but you wield it like a kid that's found his dad's gun.
He's like a really obnoxious internet troll in this scene. He gives this whole little speech about why the park is bad and Hammond is bad. And he shits all over the scientist who created the dinosaurs.
Yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they didn't stop to think if they should.
Yeah, that little stupid rhyme that he does, I don't like that line. I don't like Goldblum in this scene. It's his only bad scene. He says some really cringy stuff in this scene.
Or is what you call discovery. I call the rape of the natural world.
That moment where he slams his hands down on the table and he shakes the silverware, you really just want to roll your eyes at him.
And now you're selling it. You want to sell it. Well,
I really dislike this sort of pseudo-scientific moral grandstanding that he does. Rewatching this scene, it really kind of struck a nerve with me, if you couldn't tell. It kind of reminded me of what we see nowadays with this sort of like modern-day social media kind of holier-than-thou fake outrage, right, about stuff. That's what Malcolm feels like in this scene. It doesn't feel authentic. It doesn't really fit with him and the rest of the movie. It just doesn't work. All right, other things I wrote down in my critics' corner. Let's see. Why would they rely on electric fences to keep the predators inside, right? I mean, even if Nedry didn't cut the power, couldn't the power just go off on its own, like if there's a big storm? And then wouldn't the T-Rex and the raptors get out then, and then they're in deep shit? So why don't they just put like the T-Rex in a really deep pit like they do with lions at the zoo? Why even bother with an electric fence? Other items in the critics' corner. That whole middle section of the movie, that sequence with Nedry shutting down the park and stealing the embryos, I like that sequence, but I feel like it moves a little too fast. Like it's a little too easy for Nedry to steal the embryos. I feel like they could have expanded that sequence by about 6 minutes. Maybe make it into like more of a heist type sequence where Nedry has to work with other people. Give Samuel Jackson some more minutes in there. That would be good. Other criticisms that I have. Did they have to sideline Malcolm halfway through the movie? Right? I mean, you bench your best player halfway through the game. Once he gets injured by the T-Rex, he's out. He's basically non-existent in the second half of this movie. He doesn't have any good scenes. I feel like Spielberg should have recognized how special Goldblum was and given him more scenes. All right, other criticism. Oh, here's a question. What the hell happens to Samuel Jackson in this movie? So he's there in the control room 1 minute. They're discussing about how to turn back the power on. He's there 1 minute and then he's gone, right? We just gone. We never see him again. And then Ellie Sattler, finally reaches the shed later on, like half an hour later, where the circuit breaker is. She's trying to restart the park and she's calling out his name, Mr. Arnold, Mr. Arnold. Here's the problem. For the first maybe 6 times I saw this movie, I had no idea who Mr. Arnold was because they never really refer to him as by his name, right? So when she's saying Mr. Arnold, when I was a kid, I was like, who the hell is Mr. Arnold? And then his arm falls on her, right? And it's been revealed that his arm is detached from his body, presumably because he's been killed by the raptors, but we never see that. When did he get killed? Why don't they ever show it? 1 minute he's there and then the next he's not there. It's almost like they had a scene with him getting killed by the raptors, but then they cut it in editing.
It didn't work, man! I'm still alive, motherfucker!
And then here's another problem that I have. When his arm falls on Ellie, if you look at that arm, it looks really, really, really fake. That fake arm prop. I don't know what happened there. I don't know if Stan Winston called in sick that day, but it's a really, really bad job. And then to top it all off, if I'm being honest, if you take a look at that arm, that fake arm, one of the reasons I always had trouble making the connection that arm belonged to Sam Jackson is that the skin tone of the arm is really, really wrong. I mean, Sam Jackson is, he's black, right? He's got black skin. That arm is way too light-skinned to believe it belongs to Samuel Jackson. It's just really, really awful work. All around bad work. Go watch and see. All right, last item in the critics' corner. How hard is it really for Tim to climb down the electric fence? Right? I mean, Grant gets up and over the fence, no problem. His sister gets up and over the fence, no problem. And then Tim is just stuck there like an old grandma. He can't get down. I feel like of all 3 of them, he should be the most nimble. I don't understand that. All right. Moving on, next category, we have Best Shot. Best Shot. So let's talk about the cinematography in this movie. The cinematographer was a guy named Dean Cundy. He had a good career. He did a lot of John Carpenter movies in the 70s. He did Escape from New York, Halloween, The Fog, The Thing, Big Trouble in Little China. Those are all great movies. Other notable movies he did Back to the Future. He did Who Framed Roger Rabbit. He did Roadhouse. It's a classic. Hook. He did Hook with Spielberg right before they did Jurassic Park. And then he did Apollo 13. So he's had a good career. I really like his style, his lighting. I wish Spielberg would work with him more nowadays. Spielberg has worked exclusively with this guy Janusz Kaminski ever since he shot Schindler's List. And I really have mixed feelings about Kaminski's cinematography. I'll talk about him more later when we do other Spielberg movies on the podcast. Anyway, one of my favorite shots in this movie is it's in the amber mine early on in the movie when the lawyer Gennaro goes to go visit that amber mine. And the head of the mine, this mining guy, his name is Juanito. He's played by this actor is named Miguel Sandoval. I love him. He takes Gennaro down into the mine. They call him down there because they found a fresh piece of amber with a mosquito in it, right? Which is what the whole operation is about. So they call him down. He enters the mine, and it's this really bright backlight as he enters the mine, of course, right? That Spielberg, irrational Spielberg backlight. Like, where's that light coming from? And he descends down into the mine, and it gets darker and darker as he comes down. And he picks up the piece of amber from one of the guys, but he can't see it. He kneels down. He can't see it. It's too dark. So he calls his boys over, all these guys who are wearing hard hats with flashlights on them. It's more flashlights.
Muchachos, échame luz.
And the lawyer asks him about why Grant won't come to the park, and he's like, because Grant's like me, he's a digger. I love that line. Anyway, the camera pushes in slowly. It's extreme tight focus on the mosquito inside the piece of amber, and it really, really lights up as those guys kneel down with their flashlights.
Because Grant's like me. He's a digger. Qué lindo eres.
It's a beautiful shot. It's a really beautiful shot. I would put this up there with one of the best Spielberg shots of all time. Another great shot that I really like is that scene where they're loading into the cars right before they go out into the park. And this is a one shot. It's a 40-second continuous one shot. It's a oneer where Tim, the kid, he's really excited to meet Grant and he wants to ride with Grant. And so he's following Grant in one car and out the other. And Grant doesn't want to ride with Tim, so he's trying to escape. Spielberg, he isn't really well known for big flashy one shots the way that like Scorsese or De Palma are, but he actually uses them quite often. But he doesn't really call attention to them as much. And I actually think that's what makes them more impressive, is you kind of have to be on the lookout for them. I think to Spielberg, maybe one shots are less about like showmanship and more about just like efficient camera work. He started his career directing TV episodes when he was like still in his 20s. So I think, maybe efficiency of camera work is kind of built into his muscle memory. Another great shot is later on in the movie where it's Hammond and Sattler and Malcolm and Muldoon. They're all in the basement trying to decide what to do about turning the power back on. And this shot. It's another one shot. It's a 40-second oneer, and the camera starts at the top of the stairs and it follows Sattler down as she walks down the stairs. And then all four actors are in frame together and the camera's static. And then the camera starts moving with Muldoon as he walks over to the weapons locker. It's really smooth. It's really kind of understated. Again, you don't really even notice it's a one shot, maybe, unless you're paying attention. I actually thought the Amber Mine shot, I also had thought that was a one shot, starting all the way from when they enter the mine all the way to the extreme close-up of the mosquito. But actually there's a subtle cut in between. Actually, the one big pile of shit moment, that's actually another 40-second one shot if you go back and take a look. Other great shots that I like that I had to throw on here. I mentioned this before, the close-up of the T-Rex eye as the flashlight goes on it and the pupil constricts. I love that. I had to throw this one on here. Malcolm. Goldblum, when he gets injured and he's laid up on the table and his shirt is off and he's just posing there like a Playgirl model, right? Iconic. Last great shot. I had to throw this on there too. There's a shot towards the end of the movie where Muldoon and Sattler, they exit the bunker to cross this field to go over to the circuit breaker, and they both emerge from the bunker at the same time, and we see them both in frame. And it's a real photo finish of the century on who wins the shortest shorts contest in this moment. Ellie Sattler, she's got these like really wide bottom khaki 90s soccer mom shorts, super short. And then Muldoon, he's rocking his really, really short John Stockton khaki shorts. And just the two of them together side by side in those shorts, they just look glorious. If I saw a couple dressed up like them for Halloween, I think I'd lose my mind. Okay, let's move on to what's next. Next category. Oh, we're coming up to the acting category. So let's go through these. So first acting award is the Oscar Clip Award. This is the Oscar Clip Award for Best Acting Moment. Best acting moment in Jurassic Park. I wrote a few things down. The nominees are Jeff Goldblum in the helicopter, for sure. Goldblum in the car, explaining chaos theory, for sure. Nedry, when he meets Dodson at the lunch, absolutely. The other Nedry scene where he's great is the Dilophosaurus scene where he gets killed by the Dilophosaurus. Not right when he gets killed, but right before he gets killed, when he meets the Dilophosaurus, and it's obvious like he doesn't know what it is because he's talking to it like it's a dog, right? He's trying to play fetch with it.
Play fetch. Look, stick. See a stick? Yeah, look, stick. Look, stick, stupid. Fetch a stick, boy. Look at this. Yes. You like your stick? You want to get it? And no wonder you're extinct. I'm gonna run you over when I come back down.
I love Nedry in that scene. He's so funny. And then the last moment I want to nominate for Best Acting is, this is a little moment by John Hamm and Richard Attenborough. This is the scene where he's eating ice cream with Laura Dern. And he gives this speech. He talks about how when he was younger, the first sort of amusement park that he ever did when he was starting out in his career was when he was back in England. And he created this little like low budget flea circus. And he talks about how he always wanted to do something real, like an amusement park that was really real and would make people feel real things.
This place, I wanted to show them something that wasn't an illusion. Something that was real. Something that they could see and touch.
That's a nice moment. That's he does some real acting there. It's really good. Go back and take a look. All right, and the winner, Malcolm explaining chaos theory. That whole scene for him is Hall of Fame performance. All right, next award is the Sixth Man Award. This is for Best Supporting Performance. This is I don't think Goldblum should be nominated here. He's too dominating. He'll be a candidate for the MVP award. We'll do that later. So the nominees for Sixth Man Award Best Supporting Performance are, let's see, I've got John Hammond, Samuel Jackson, he's great, Nedry for sure, and then I also want to nominate the kid, Tim, Joseph Mazzello. He's really, really good. Who do I give it to? They're all good. I think I got to go with Nedry, right? Wayne Knight, he wins. He's great in this movie. Hello, Newman. All right, the next acting award is the Day Player Award. This is Day Player Award, this is like a bit part. This is like for an actor who's only in one scene. And I've got I got three nominees. The first one is, I already mentioned him before, Juanito Miguel Sandoval, the Amber Mine guy. Just his line reading, and that like devilish smile that he has. Grant's like me, he's a digger. He's great. I love him in that scene. The other guy I want to nominate is B.D. Wong. This is the lab guy, Henry Wu. It's the Asian guy at the park who's there when they're when the eggs are hatching.
You're implying that a group composed entirely of female animals will breed?
No, I'm simply saying that life finds a way.
He's pretty good. And then lastly, I got to nominate Dodgson. Right? Dodgson. He's only in that one scene with Nedry, and he doesn't do much, but everybody loves Dodgson. Actually, this actor, I looked this guy up, the guy who plays Dodgson. His name is Cameron. What is it? Cameron Thor, I think. And apparently this actor, he's in prison right now for being a pedophile. So I probably shouldn't give him the award. I'm going to give the award to Miguel Sandoval, Juanito. Grant's like me, he's a digger. I love that. He gets the Day Player Award. All right, moving on. We've got alternate castings. So this is like if you were to go back to 1993 and recast this movie, who would you choose with those actors at that time? So let's start with Grant. It's played by Sam Neill. Sam Neill was 45. Like I said before, I don't love him in this movie. From what I could tell doing some research, other actors that were considered for this role, William Hurt, he might have been okay. And then, the big name that came up in my research was Harrison Ford. And I think it's pretty obvious that it should have been him, right? I can't think of anybody who would have been better. It's almost maybe too obvious. I don't know. Is that character too similar to Indiana Jones? Maybe. I'm not sure if that's why, if he turned it down because of that. But I just think this movie is 30% better with Harrison Ford as Grant. The other name I wrote down, I was thinking about early 90s actors who would have been good. I put down Kevin Costner. I think that might have been interesting to see him. Let's see. Malcolm, Jeff Goldblum, who would you cast? I can't imagine anybody else. Jeff Goldblum was 40 when they filmed this movie. He's just so perfect for this role. Nobody else could do what he does. The only person I thought of maybe who could do what he does is Robert Downey Jr. But I think back then he was probably a little bit too young. I think Robert Downey was probably still in his 20s. In the early 90s, apparently Jim Carrey auditioned for this role. I really can't imagine him working at all. I can't even picture what he would have done. I was trying to think of other actors who could have pulled this off. I don't think anybody could have done what Goldblum does, but I think there's a couple actors who would have done maybe something different, but would have been still interesting. And I thought maybe Alec Baldwin, he's kind of got that asshole vibe. And I thought maybe he could have done something interesting. And then maybe Bill Murray? I don't know. Maybe a little bit too wacky. I don't All right, Nedry, who would you cast? Again, I can't think of anybody except Wayne Knight. Actually, I wrote down one name. It's kind of ironic. The only other person I kind of could picture playing Nedry in the early 90s is Jason Alexander, right? Costanza from Seinfeld. I mean, those two characters are kind of similar in a lot of ways. Spielberg chose to cast Wayne Knight after seeing his acting performance in Basic Instinct. He said, "I waited for the credits to roll and I wrote his name down. He was the first actor to be cast." Yeah, he's so great. All right, Ray Arnold. Who would you cast? I would just go with Sam Jackson again. He's great. He knocks that out of the park. Actually, I was thinking, what if you switched Wayne Knight and Sam Jackson? Right? What if Samuel Jackson played Nedry? Right? What if you made him the bad guy? Could be cool. That could be interesting. I mean, he wouldn't be the same character as Nedry, obviously. He would have to do something different, but I'd watch that. All right, Ellie Sattler. Laura Dern was 25. She was young when she played this. She was Spielberg's first choice. Other actresses considered, let's see, Robin Wright. She turned down the role. Sandra Bullock, Gwyneth Paltrow, Julianne Moore, who she was in the sequel. She was in Lost World. Helen Hunt, Terry Hatcher, Elizabeth Hurley. Elizabeth Hurley wouldn't have worked. She's too pretty. I like the idea of Sandra Bullock. You know, she could kind of do nerdy scientist. She'd be good. I'd like to see that. Let's see. John Hammond was played by Attenborough. He was 70. The role was offered to Sean Connery. That's what I wrote down before I even looked that up, and I thought, yeah, that would have been good. I like Attenborough though. He's good. It's funny. I had seen Jurassic Park a million times, and then I had seen Great Escape a million times. That's like the big role he had when he was younger. And I had never realized that he was in both until like relatively recently in my adult life. Just because he's so young in Great Escape, you never make the connection that it's the same guy. But I like him. He's good. All right, next category. This is current day remake casting. So this is like, you know, if they remade Jurassic Park today in the modern era, you know, 2020, who would you cast in these roles? So I have a list here I wrote down. So for Alan Grant, I got Matt Damon. You could see that, right? That would work. He'd be good. He can play nerdy. Kind of the same character as he plays in The Martian, maybe. If you wanted to go a little bit younger, I thought maybe Chris Evans, right? Captain America. He could be good. For Ellie Sattler, I got Scarlett Johansson. She'd be good. She could do kind of nerdy. For Ian Malcolm, you know, you could plausibly just recast Goldblum again. He's aged really well. He still brings it. That might work. But you know who I'd like to see? Since I already have maybe Chris Evans and Scarlett Johansson to round out the Avengers, I'd like to see Robert Downey Jr. He's old enough now that he could play Ian Malcolm. Yeah, I think that'd be good. If you want to go a little bit younger for Malcolm, you could do Ryan Reynolds, I thought, maybe for Malcolm. That could be good. For John Hammond, I got Michael Caine. Love to see him. Or I also wrote down Morgan Freeman. I think both those guys would be amazing. For Ray Arnold, who would you cast? I just put down Sam Jackson. I think he could still play the role. He's still great. I think you need an anchor if you're going to do a remake. It'd be funny if they remade Jurassic Park and they put Sam Jackson in it, and in the remake he's missing an arm. And then last but not least, Nedry. Who would you cast as Nedry in a current day remake? I put down Seth Rogen. I think that's a solid remake cast, right? I'd go see that movie. I'd go see it. All right, next category. Next category is Best Line. Best Line. So like I said, this movie is just bursting with classic quotes. I think almost every scene has a famous, memorable line. Picking a winner is going to be tough. Let's just go through these. Got a whole big list here. Let's see. Shoot Her. We already talked about. Because Grant's like me, he's a digger. Love that. Let's see. John Hammond, it's right up your alley.
It's right up your alley.
Other good lines. Don't get cheap on me, Dodgson. So you two dig up dinosaurs. Hold on to your butts. Sam Jackson actually says that twice in this movie. I didn't realize that. Are these characters... This line, I got to give a little bit of a backstory. So this line is Gennaro, the lawyer. This is one of his lines. He's kind of a weird character. This is when they're on the Mr. DNA thing, when they're in that theater, and they're going around. It's rotating, and they see the lab workers, doing all the science stuff, and Gennaro asks John. He points to the lab workers, and he's like, "John, are those characters auto-erotica?"
This is overwhelming, John. Are these characters auto-erotica?
No. We have no animal.
Well, what the hell? What is he even trying to say? Autoerotica? Isn't that like where you get off on being asphyxiated? I don't even know what he's trying to say. Is he trying to say animatronics? And then Hammond doesn't even react to it, and it's really, really weird. Let's see. Now eventually you do plan to have dinosaurs on your dinosaur tour, right?
Now eventually you do plan to have dinosaurs on your dinosaur tour, right?
I love that. That is one big pile of shit. You didn't say the magic word. Must go faster. When the Pirates of the Caribbean break down, the pirates don't eat the tourists. I love that. Muldoon's most famous line from the end of the movie, "Clever girl," right before he gets killed.
Clever girl.
Malcolm's most famous line, right? "Life finds a way," right? And then last but not least, "Spared no expense," right? My personal favorite. How many times does John Hammond say "spared no expense" in this movie? 6 times. 6 times, I counted. All right, so I mean, take your pick. There's so many great lines to choose from. I'm going to go with "Life Finds a Way," just because I think really that's the tagline for the entire franchise, right? And the way Goldblum says it, "Life finds a way," that little pause he does, the inflection. I always wondered if he got his speaking style from Shatner, William Shatner, right? If that's what he modeled his speech on. I think he did, maybe. All right, moving on. Next category, overlooked details. Overlooked details. These are just like little details from the movie that I wrote down that I wanted to point out. In the Mr. DNA cartoon, because Hammond says Mr. DNA in it, but because of his accent, it sounds like Mr. D&E.
Oh, Mr. DNA, where did you come from?
Early on, when the lawyer Gennaro is visiting the amber mine, he's being pulled in on that raft, and Juanito is waiting for him, and Juanito mumbles something in Spanish to the guys there.
Puesto 1,000 pesos que se cae.
What he's saying is, "I bet he slips," in Spanish, and then a minute later, Gennaro slips on the rocks. Let's see. When Grant meets Hammond at the dig site, and Grant's all pissed off because of the helicopter blowing up the dust, and so he comes in, and his finger's all dusty, and he points at Hammond. He says, "Who do you think you are?" John Hammond just shakes his finger, and then he just blows the dust off of his hand.
Who in God's name do you think you are? John Hammond. And I'm delighted to meet you finally in person, Dr. Grant.
I love that little moment. That's more Spielberg humor. Let's see. When Hammond says, "I can tell instantly about people, it's a gift," except, well, like the obvious exception, right? He couldn't tell about Nedry. And then also when John Hammond keeps saying "spared no expense," obviously he didn't pay Nedry enough, right? I thought that was funny. Here's a cool little detail. I can't take credit for this. I saw this, I'm not sure where, somewhere on the internet. So the 3 outfits that Nedry wears in this movie are the same outfits that the kid wears in the Goonies. So if just go to Google and Google Jurassic Park Goonies and go to the image results. So the 3 outfits that Nedry wears are, he wears that floral print Hawaiian shirt, which is what Chunk wears in the Goonies. And then he's wearing the gray members only jacket when he's at the computer, and that's what Corey Feldman wears. And then he's wearing the yellow raincoat when he gets killed by the Dilophosaurus. That's what Sean Astin wears in the Goonies. That's a really cool little detail. I'm not sure who's responsible for that. I think maybe Spielberg, because Spielberg, he didn't direct the Goonies, but he did produce it. So I bet you he's behind that. Speaking of outfits, okay, I talked about this earlier. So we've got John Hammond in black, and you've got, John Hammond in white, Malcolm in black, right? And they're kind of like opposing figures, right? White, black, optimist, pessimist. Okay, whatever. On a more subtle note, I was watching this movie, and Ellie Sattler, she's wearing a pink shirt. And Dr. Alan Grant, he's wearing a blue shirt. And I was thinking about, okay, you got white and black opposing forces. I was like, what about pink and blue? And how are those opposing forces? Well, they kind of represent female and male, right? Pink and blue. And then I was thinking about like how there's sort of this theme of gender in this movie, how all the dinosaurs on the island are female for population control. But then what do they find out? They find out that some of the dinosaurs are male, and so they're able to breed because the DNA that they use to fill in the genetic gaps is this frog DNA, and some species of frogs can spontaneously change from female to male. And so that's how there's some male dinosaurs on the park, even though that it didn't work out. And it's Malcolm's whole chaos theory, life finds a way. Anyway, if you watch this movie, look at what Ellie Sattler is wearing. She's wearing the pink shirt throughout the movie, but towards the end, just sort of randomly, she loses that pink shirt, right? She's no longer wearing it, and she's just wearing an undershirt, and the color of that undershirt is blue. Isn't that interesting? She goes from pink to blue, just like certain dinosaurs on the island go from female to male. And I don't know if that's intentional. I don't know. I was not under the influence of any substances when I watched this movie, but it's just something that I noticed. And I had to wonder, like, I can't be the only one. I bet you there's some sociology PhD student out there who's written a thesis on how Jurassic Park is like a trans advocacy film or something like that. I won't go there. But it's something to think about when you've seen this movie way too many times like I have. All right, let's see. Other little overlooked details. Henry Wu, when he's in the lab, we see him using a pencil when he's writing stuff down, and then he erases it. And you're not supposed to do that if you're a scientist. You're supposed to use a pen so you can't cover up your work, which maybe hints at some of the problems with the park. That's not my observation. I can't take credit for that. I forgot where I saw that, but maybe on the internet somewhere. I like that little moment. Again, going back to the Mr. DNA cartoon, where you have the on-screen Hammond, the Hammond in the film, and then he's asking questions of the real-life Hammond who's standing there in the theater. He asks him for a prompt, and real-life Hammond forgets his cue. So he has to dig into his pockets for his cue cards, but he can't find them, and he doesn't have time to respond. So then the on-screen Hammond keeps talking. It's hilarious how like real that moment feels. It's little moments like that. Spielberg humor. I know I keep beating that drum, but I think it's really great. All right, last little overlooked detail. I think a lot of people already know this one, but I think it's pretty cool. This is on the helicopter where they're descending, and Grant's trying to buckle his seatbelt, but he can't find the male and the female latch to buckle his seatbelt. He just has the two female latches, and so he just ties those in a knot. He fashions a seatbelt out of the two female latches, and it's kind of more symbolism for how two female dinosaurs are able to breed. Basically, life finds a way. It's more of that. Anyway, it's a nice little detail. All right, moving on. We talked about best acting. Let's do worst acting moment. It's not too many, but there's a few. First and foremost, I got to nominate the kid at the dig site.
That doesn't look very scary.
Just this kid makes my skin crawl. Just go back and watch this scene. When Grant shows him that raptor claw, his eyes go so super wide when he sees that claw. It's the worst overreaction take in the history of cinema. It has to be. You know that this kid had to have been like a producer's son or something like this. Serious, how did this kid get in a Spielberg movie? When we do the rankings later at the end of this podcast, I'm going to talk about the best kid performances in a Spielberg movie. Guess who is absolutely not on this list? All right, other bad acting in this movie. Muldoon has this really bad moment where right before they reach the Tyrannosaur exhibit, Muldoon's watching them from the control room, and he suddenly gets all really, really loud and scared. He's like, "Quiet, all of you."
For half an hour.
Quiet, all of you.
I'm approaching the Tyrannosaur paddock.
And he's staring really wide-eyed, and he looks just like that stupid kid at the dig site. It's really overdone from him. That's a little bit of overacting. And then there's also some overacting from John Hammond when Sam Jackson tells Hammond that they have to end the tour prematurely because of the storm. Hammond gets all pissed off. He slams his walking stick down, and he's like, "Damn." And he's really, really shaking. And it's super overacted. And then the last nominee for worst acting moment is Lex, the sister. This is another shaking moment. This is when, at the end of the movie, where she's in the cafeteria with Tim, and they're eating, and she's got this like spoonful of Jell-O, and she raises it up to her mouth, and then she sees the raptor standing behind Tim, and that spoonful of Jello, she's just like shaking the shit out of it. It's really, really, really overdone. It's not subtle at all. That's some bad acting. All right, the winner for worst acting moment. It's the kid at the dig site. He sucks.
That doesn't look very scary.
All right, next category is worst line. We talked about best lines. Now we're going to do worst lines. There's not too many in this movie. Basically, everything Goldblum says at that lunch, every word that he utters, they just need to delete that whole scene. And they need to add in a scene showing how Samuel L. Jackson died. Please and thank you. All right, next category. Next category is lingering questions. Lingering questions. These are just little questions that I wrote down, things that I was wondering about when I watched this movie. All right, here's a question. What's the dollar price per animal? Like all in, what does a T-Rex cost? What does a raptor cost? More to the point, how much did the death of the raptor at the beginning of the movie cost? Right? When Muldoon had his boys kill him? And why wasn't Hammond more pissed about that? Why is he all buddy-buddy with Muldoon? I would have shit-canned Muldoon if he killed my raptor. I still don't get, again, why they couldn't just tranquilize the thing. Here's a question. When the lawyer Gennaro, he visits that mine, the amber mine, why is he dressed in a full suit in the middle of the jungle? And then where exactly is he coming from? So he's standing on this raft. It's like just like a piece of wood, and they're pulling him in on a rope. But where's he coming from? How did he get on that raft? Where was he before that? It just looks like he's a pond that he's in. Is he coming from the other side of the pond? In which case, what's on the other side of the pond? Did he just walk through the jungle to get to this thing? Why? Why is he wearing a suit? Doesn't make sense to me. All right, here's a question. Why does Nedry need to shut the park down? You know, all this shit happens on the park. The dinosaurs get out because Nedry shuts down the electric fences, right? And he shuts down the electric fences because, I think if I had this right, because he needs to drive through the park with the embryos. He steals the embryos. He puts them in a little shaving cream can. And then he needs to drive those across the park to get to the boat. Because there's a guy in the boat who works for Dodson, and he's giving him... Okay, so why does he need to shut down the electric fences, right? I mean, don't other people go to the boat the same way? They don't need to shut down the fence. And there's other workers on the island, right? It's not just these 4 guys working in the control room. It's all the lab workers. It's all the security guys. The famous chef who makes the Chilean sea bass. He needs to get off the island. So this storm is coming in. And Sam Jackson even says, there's a line where he gets on the PA and he says, the last shuttle to the boat takes off in 15 minutes. Stop what you're doing and leave now. So how do all those people get to the boat? They don't have to go through the middle of the park, right? They don't have to shut down the fences. So why can't Nedry just drive that way? Doesn't make any sense. And then also, along those same lines, why isn't he concerned about shutting down the electric fences? He's not planning on escaping the park. He's not getting on the boat. He's just dropping off the shaving cream can, and then he's going to drive back to the control room and pretend like he was at the vending machines the whole time. But certainly he must realize that if he shuts down the electric fences, the animals are going to escape, and then he'd be at risk. None of that seems well thought out to me. Other lingering questions? Oh, at the Montana dig site, why does everyone laugh at Grant when he says that dinosaurs are more like birds than reptiles?
And look at the half-moon-shaped bones on the wrist. It's no wonder these guys learn how to fly. No, seriously.
Everyone's laughing at him here. Aren't these people like his grad students? Wouldn't they have already heard his theories about paleontology? Why would they laugh at him? All right, speaking of that dig site in Montana, this is a question that I have. Where did John Hammond come from? He's inside Grant's trailer, opening up bottles of champagne. How did he get there? I'm very confused about this. So the helicopter comes to pick up John Hammond. The helicopter's kicking up all this dust. Grant runs down. He's yelling at the helicopter pilot. He says, cut off your engine, cut off your engine. You're kicking up all this dust. It's destroying my skeleton. Helicopter is just landing, right? The pilot, he's pointing at the trailer. He's pointing at Grant's trailer, saying, go over there, go over there. So Grant goes over there. He goes inside the trailer to discover John Hammond. So how did John Hammond get there? Right? How long has he been inside? He's rummaging through the refrigerator, opening up bottles of champagne. So it looks like he's just got there, right? So what happened? Did a car drop him off at the trailer? And then 5 minutes later, a helicopter comes to pick him up? Why? Why wouldn't the car just take him? Or why wouldn't the helicopter have dropped him off? I've always been very confused by this. All right, next lingering question. Oh, this is something that Gennaro says that kind of confuses me. So Gennaro's a lawyer, and he represents these investors who are investing in the park. And so he comes down to kind of check on the status of the park to report back to the investors. And so he says something to Hammond. He says, if in 48 hours they are not convinced, I am not convinced.
Your investors, whom I represent, are deeply concerned. 48 hours from now, if they're not convinced, I'm not convinced.
Shouldn't it be the other way around? Shouldn't he be saying, if in 48 hours I am not convinced by what I see in the park, then I'm going to report back to the investors and they will not be convinced? That really confuses me. All right, here's a question. How much does a T-Rex really eat in the course of a day? So let's just go through the list here. I wrote down what it eats. It eats the goat. It eats Gennaro. It eats a lot of that car. It eats that flocking Gallimimus, which is a pretty big animal. It seems like that's a lot to eat in under 24 hours, right? I don't think they need to eat that much, do they? All right, here's a question. Wouldn't there be all sorts of extinct animals bitten by mosquitoes trapped in amber, not just dinosaurs, right? Where are the saber-toothed tigers? Where are the woolly mammoths? The dodo birds? On that note, how did they clone the extinct plants?
Alan, this species of Variformin's been extinct since the Cretaceous period. I mean, this thing is...
So how did they clone that? Presumably it's from the same way they cloned the dinosaurs through the mosquito DNA, but how would you get plant DNA inside a mosquito? Mosquitoes don't bite plants, so where did they get the plant DNA from? Doesn't make sense. Oh, here's a question. Why was the Triceratops sick? Right? We never get an answer to that. This kind of bothers me. So the T-Rex pen, all of a sudden, at the end of that scene, it's got this like 200-foot drop in it. So at the beginning of the scene, the T-Rex pen, like on both sides of the fence, are on the same level, the ground. So the T-Rex just walks through the fence, and then he's on the same level as the cars. But then at the end of the scene, the T-Rex pushes the car back over on the other side of the fence, and then it drops down like 200 feet. All of a sudden, there's this big drop in it. How did that happen? Where did that drop come from? Is it a different pen? I don't think it's a different pen because that's where that goat was. So they're in the same place that the goat was. Doesn't make sense. Okay, here's a question I have about the Mr. DNA cartoon. So they do this like little gimmick where they have a filmed version of John Hammond, and then they've got the John Hammond in real life in the theater answering questions. So what's the plan? Is John Hammond going to be present at every showing of that cartoon just so he can answer those questions? That doesn't seem realistic. Also, on that same note, John Hammond says that he's been present for the birth of every dinosaur on the island.
I've been present for the birth of every little creature on this island.
So this island is what? It's really remote, right? It's 120 miles off the coast of Costa Rica. Does John Hammond live there full time just so he can see the birth of every dinosaur? Isn't he a billionaire? Doesn't he have like a house in Aspen that he goes to? That doesn't seem realistic. Here's another question about John Hammond. Where did he get his limp? Right? He walks with this bamboo cane. He's got the cool little amber headstone. He has a limp. Where did he get his limp from? Did they just give him a limp because they wanted him to have a cool walking stick? I'm fine with that, by the way. I'm just curious. Okay. Oh, going back to the goat at the T-Rex exhibit, where does that goat come from? It just kind of pops up out of nowhere, out of the ground in this elevator platform. It's chained to a post. How long had it been there? Who put it there? Is there like a goat herder working underground full time and he's just waiting for a call like he's in a bullpen? Also, another thing that I noticed at that T-Rex scene, while they're parked there, Grant, he opens a car door and he sticks his water bottle outside in the rain to fill it up with water. How long would he have had to hold that water bottle there to fill it up? It doesn't have like a wide mouth. It's got like a normal narrow mouth on a water bottle. I feel like he would have been holding that there for hours. Let's see. Other lingering questions. Could an electric fence really contain the T-Rex? I think no, right? I think no, because when you see it break through the fence, when the power's off, it breaks through super easily, right? So it's not like it's a really super strong fence physically. The only thing then that's keeping it inside is the electricity. And I don't think it's enough because the T-Rex has these huge claws. and it could just like snap through the wire with one of those claws. I can't imagine those claws are very conductive to electricity, so I don't think it's going to feel pain. And then on that same note, do we really believe that Tim would survive that electric fence when it gets turned on, right? He gets zapped, but then he lives. So there's a sign on the fence in the movie. It says 10,000 volts. And that seems like a lot. If it's enough juice to keep out the T-Rex, I think it's enough to kill little Timmy. Let's see. Other lingering questions. Why does Grant throw away his raptor claw? He throws it away after the T-Rex attack. He spends the night in the jungle with the kids. They fall asleep up in the tree. He just throws away his raptor claw. That's like his prized possession. Why? I don't get it. Is he going to retire from paleontology now? Does he no longer like dinosaurs? Doesn't make sense. All right, last lingering question. At the end of the movie, they leave the island and they're flying out on the helicopter. Grant, he looks out the window and he sees these pelicans flying. They're flying in the same direction as the helicopter right alongside. And he stares out the window and he's staring at them. And the camera like zooms in on them and really lingers on them. And there's this like really dramatic John Williams music that's going. And it's meant to seem as if this is a really significant moment. Grant looking at these pelicans, but I don't get why. Why do we care about pelicans flying? What's the significance of that? It's very confusing. All right, moving on. Next category is trivia. Just some things I found out about this movie doing a little bit of internet research. So let's see. Filming took place in California and Hawaii between August and November 1992. Post-production rolled until May 1993. It was supervised by Spielberg in Poland as he filmed Schindler's List. He monitored the progress of the crew from Poland during the filming of Schindler's List. He had teleconferences 4 times a week with Industrial Light and Magic. This is the most amazing piece of trivia to me. The director described working simultaneously in 2 vastly different productions as a bipolar experience. He said he used every ounce of intuition on Schindler's List and every ounce of craft on Jurassic Park. Let's see. The shaking water glass, that was created, the way they did that, they put a little piano string underneath the dash of the car. There's just a guy underneath plucking it. That's how they did that. Let's see. In real life, the Velociraptor was not large. It was only about the size of a turkey, but Spielberg wanted it bigger for the film. And then shortly after the movie was released, they found a dinosaur fossil in Utah that was identical in size to the Velociraptor in the movie. They called it Utah Raptor. It's pretty cool. Life imitates art. Let's see. The Tyrannosaurus roar. It was a combination of dog, penguin, tiger, alligator, and elephant. Let's see. Michael Crichton, he said he intended John Hammond to be a dark Walt Disney. Jeff Goldblum's line, "Must go faster," while he's being chased by the T-Rex. He says that line also in Independence Day. Where he and Will Smith are escaping the alien mothership. Let's see. There's only 15 minutes of dinosaur footage in this movie. 9 of it are Stan Winston's animatronics. Only 6 minutes of CGI. Spielberg, he made $250 million off of gross proceeds from the box office. It's the largest sum of money any individual has made from a movie. That is one big pile of money. Good for him. He deserved it. Let's see. James Cameron. I love this little piece of trivia. James Cameron, he said he wanted to direct the movie, and he wanted to do the movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger as Grant, Bill Paxton as Malcolm, and Charlton Heston as Hammond. Oh my God. Can you imagine? All right, go back. I changed my mind about recasting. I want that movie. I want all that cast. Yes, absolutely. I vote yes. I want to see that movie. Let's see, other trivia. Dilophosaurus, the spitting dinosaur, it actually couldn't spit venom. That wasn't a real ability. That was a fictional ability that Crichton gave it. And then also the Dilophosaurus, there's no CGI for that dinosaur. All the Dilophosaurus is, it's all practical effect. Okay, that's all I have for trivia. Let's see. Next category is... Oh, I like this one. What physical item from the movie would you want to own? So I have a list here. There's some cool stuff in this movie I'd like to own. So I wrote down Grant's claw, the raptor claw, right? That's cool. John Hammond's cane, right, with a little piece of amber on it. That's fun. You could kind of mount that on your wall in your house like a sword, for all your nerdy friends to enjoy. The shaving cream can, that's fun. I'm not really sure what you would do with that, but you like a little party gag. The night vision goggles, those are cool. I like the ground radar thing that at the Montana dig site, those guys shoot that charge into the ground and it creates the image of the underground fossil. That's pretty cool. I'd like that. I don't know what I would do with it. Try to find some buried treasure maybe. And then the Jeep Wrangler, Jurassic Park Jeep, that'd be pretty cool. Let's see, which one of those would I want to own? I'll go with the claw, Raptor claw. That's pretty cool. All right, next category. Ooh, I like this one. This category is obituary status. Obituary status. So what is this? So basically, this is like when an actor dies, they'll list like his 2 or 3 most famous roles or famous movies, right? So for example, like when Harrison Ford dies, right? What movies will they put in his obituary? It'll be just a couple, right? They'll have Star Wars in there, and then they'll have Indiana Jones, and then that's probably will be it. Maybe they'll include Blade Runner, but they're not going to list Hollywood Homicide, right, on Harrison Ford's obituary. So the question is, will Jurassic Park be on these actors' obituaries? So let's go through the list. So Jeff Goldblum, will Jurassic Park be on his obituary? I think yeah. I think it's probably his most famous role. Even though I think he's only a supporting character in this movie. He's had leading roles. He was the leading role in the sequel, right, Lost World. And then he was the leading role in Independence Day. But I think this is his most famous role. I think that put 2 movies on his obituary, Jurassic Park and Independence Day. Laura Dern, Jurassic Park obituary. Yeah, I think this is her most famous role. Richard Attenborough. I think absolutely. I think especially for like my generation and younger, I think this is all they know him from. Maybe my dad's generation, he's more famous for Great Escape. Also, he directed Gandhi too. That'll probably be on his obituary. Well, I think he's probably already dead. We could look it up. Sam Neill, obituary, Jurassic Park. Yeah, absolutely. I think Jurassic Park and Red October. Let's see. Sam Jackson. Is Jurassic Park on his obituary? I think no. Right? I think absolutely not. Like I said, it's easy to forget that he's even in this movie. The question that's tough is what goes on Sam Jackson's obituary? What's his most famous role? I think it's got to be Pulp Fiction, right? I'm not sure what else it would be. Let's see. Wayne Knight, is Jurassic Park on his obituary? I think no. I think he's always going to be most famous for Seinfeld. How about this? Obituary status for Crichton. Is Jurassic Park on his obituary? Yeah, I think so. I think it's his most famous book, right? Actually, I think Crichton's dead, so we could look this up. I think he's probably most famous for Jurassic Park and then ER, right? If you didn't know, he created the TV show ER. All right, how about this one? This is a tough one. Spielberg. Is Jurassic Park on his obituary? This is really, really tough. I actually have no idea. He's done so many big movies. Jurassic Park is his most commercially successful film. Yeah, no, it is. It is. I think it's going to be Jaws and maybe Raiders of the Lost Ark. I don't know. Maybe. All right, let's move on. Next category is the MVP award. MVP award, most valuable player. So this is kind of what I'm trying to gauge here is sort of a wins above replacement sort of metric. So like if you replaced this actor with just like an average Hollywood actor, how much would the movie suffer? I only have 2 nominees for MVP for this movie. There's only 2 obvious ones. The first is Goldblum, right? And I think he has a really high WAR rating here. I think if you replaced him with just an average actor, this movie is not at all the same. He really brings something special. And then the second is Spielberg, right? And I got to give it to him. I think Spielberg is obviously the MVP. This movie really cemented his status as the biggest Hollywood director, and he made $250 million off of this. And he really showed that he could put something together that was really fun and funny and scary. And he was able to incorporate the CGI, which you have to remember was kind of a new thing still at the time, and I think most directors really couldn't have handled it. And then just the idea that he was off directing Schindler's List right after this, it's just insane to me. He definitely wins the MVP award for Jurassic Park. All right, let's get to the rankings for this movie. Where does it rank Jurassic Park best dinosaur movie? I think it's got to be number 1, because I can't even think of number 2. I can't think of any other dinosaur movies, right? Is there anything else? The Land Before Time, right? Maybe that's number 2. I don't know. All right, where does it rank Jurassic Park best Spielberg movie? Ooh, this is tough. Maybe it's in the top 5. It's not his best. It's definitely not his best. It's definitely behind Raiders. It's definitely behind Jaws. I don't know. I'll do my list of Spielberg movies at some point later in this podcast, but maybe it's in the top 5. I don't know. All right. Best Crichton movie. Jurassic Park? Yeah, I think so. It's hard to even think of other Crichton movies. There's a couple good ones. Rising Sun is actually pretty good. That's a movie with, who was in that? Wesley Snipes and Sean Connery. I like that movie. And then there's one I also like is Congo. It's kind of a guilty pleasure, but I watch it maybe once a year. I'll probably do that on the podcast. I like Congo. Let's see. Best John Williams theme song. Jurassic Park. I put it in the top 5. I think his best is Star Wars. And I think maybe a close number 2 is Indiana Jones. Jurassic Park is, it's good. It's in the top 5, I think. Let's see. Best Goldblum movie, Jurassic Park. I actually think, I didn't think it was going to be. I went through his IMDb, and I was actually really surprised how little work he's done. He actually really hasn't been in that many big movies. He kind of had his breakout role in the 80s with The Fly, and then in the 90s, he kind of peaked with Jurassic Park. He did Independence Day, and then he did Lost World. But then after that, he hasn't really done much. Like, he hasn't really had any leading roles. He's done a lot of like little independent films. He does bit parts. He just feels underutilized. I liked him recently in Thor Ragnarok. He was really funny in that movie. But I feel like the name Goldblum is bigger than his actual career, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think Jurassic Park is actually his best movie. Let's see, where does it rank? Best Laura Dern movie? I have it at number 2. I think number 1 for her is Blue Velvet. I think that's her best movie. Let's see. Next ranking, best opening scene of a Spielberg movie. Where does it rank? Jurassic Park. So I have it at number 3. Number 1 is Raiders of the Lost Ark, by far and away the best opening scene, I think, of any movie. And then number 2, I put Saving Private Ryan. You know, the scene on the beach. You got to put that ahead of it. I'm not a huge fan of Saving Private Ryan in general. Like the movie as a whole, I actually don't love it that much. But that opening scene, credit where credit's due. Let's see. Next ranking. Best. Let's see. Oh, most number of great lines in a Spielberg movie. Where does it rank? Jurassic Park, absolutely number 1. So many great lines. Best screenplay of a Spielberg movie. I don't even know what number 2 would be. Oh, how about this? Oh, I like this ranking. What is the best sneak attack in movie history? And the answer is, it's the T-Rex at the end of Jurassic Park. So I should have put this in my lingering questions category. So at the end of the movie, if you'll recall, the Raptors have cornered Grant and everyone else in like the lobby of this headquarters, and they're about to attack. And they're in this lobby, and right as the raptor lunges at them, out of like the wild blue yonder, the T-Rex, who just happened to be standing in this room and nobody noticed, swoops down, picks up the raptor in its mouth, throws it across the room. Everyone stares up at the T-Rex like, oh, hey, where did you come from? Well, yeah, duh. Where did it come from? How did nobody see this giant Tyrannosaurus standing in this room? Nobody noticed. Right? How did it even get in the room? How did it even fit through the door? That's ridiculous. So yeah, the best sneak attack in movie history. The winner goes to the T-Rex at the end of Jurassic Park. All right, last ranking is the best child performance in a Spielberg movie. So Spielberg's directed a lot of kids in his movies. I went back through his IMDb and wrote down some, I think, what are the best performances. So I got Elliot in E.T., That kid was pretty good. I got Short Round in Temple of Doom, right? Empire of the Sun, Christian Bale, right? He was good. Haley Joel Osment in AI. That movie is that's a tough rewatch for me. That movie kind of drags, but he's good in it. He's a good actor. I wrote down. I had to put down Rufio and Hook just because everyone loves Rufio. And then last but not least, Tim in Jurassic Park. Right, he's really really good. My favorite is Short Round and Temple of Doom, but I think number 2 would be Tim in Jurassic Park. I like him. All right, last but not least, our last category. We made it. We did it, you guys. So my last category to wrap up the podcast is The Escapist. This is the category. So what is this? So instead of giving the film like a rating out of 5 stars, what I want to try to do here is gauge the quality of the film and give it sort of a final evaluation in terms of how well it succeeds at invoking a sense of escapism, right? I think the best movies or TV shows or books or even video games, they all have this quality. Even if they're really dark or scary or violent, if they're done right, you still want to keep on watching, right? You want to stay in that world. When the movie ends, you leave the theater, but you still kind of want to hang out with those characters some more. That's the escapist factor. And so the question here is, if you could, would you want to live in the world of this movie, right? And for how long? And assume you won't suffer any trauma or death, like if you went into a war movie. You would just be hanging out in that world, hanging out with those characters. And so what's my escapist rating for Jurassic Park? I think absolutely yes, I'd want to live in the world of Jurassic Park. I want to hang out on that island with those characters, see the dinosaurs, right? Bust out the shorts and go out in the Jeep with Muldoon, smoke a cigarette with Sam Jackson, eat some ice cream with John Hammond. I would love that. I'd love that. I love those guys. How long would I want to do it for? I think maybe just a weekend. I think that would be plenty. I think the novelty of being on the island would wear off after a little bit. I think, you'd get used to the dinosaurs. Malcolm would probably get really annoying after a while. And the Wi-Fi way out there on the island would probably be slow. So my escapist rating for Jurassic Park is 1 weekend. All right, so that's the escapist rating, and that's the podcast. We did it. We made it. This was fun, you guys. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any feedback, anything you'd like to tell me, things you like, things you don't like, anything you'd like to see more of, less of, any movies you'd like me to cover. Again, you can email me. Please do so. escapistpod@gmail.com. That is escapistpod@gmail.com. Or follow me on Twitter. Same thing, escapistpod on Twitter. Love to hear from you. Okay, before we go, I would like to let you know what movie I'll be doing next time for episode number 2. So if you want to watch ahead of time and join me, so you can. So let me consult my list here. 1 second. And movie list. Okay, so yes. So for next time, we're going to be doing a very little known 2009 movie that some of you may have seen called Avatar. Avatar. I'm looking forward to covering that one. I haven't watched Avatar. It's been a while. All right, amigos. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening. Thanks for staying to the end. Those of you who did, if anybody did, or did I lose everybody? And now I'm here talking to myself. That's chaos theory.